All right, welcome back into For the Truth. This is your host, Josh Keene, along with co-host Mr. 79, Ryan Swedberg.
Did break 80 in a tournament.
Did break 80 in a golf tournament.
Which was my goal. So I was happy with that, but disappointed that the first hole, or the last hole rather, ended with a 3-putt from 15 feet. So
yeah, that's
what could have been a 77 ended up being a 79. So you leave a bad taste in your mouth, but it was fun.
Yeah, I've never 3-putted anything, so I don't even know how to
good experience.
Relate to
especially when you're inside of 15 feet.
Yeah. Obviously, we are in a different setting today if you're watching on YouTube. Holding the microphones, so if we move them around, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
My house is for sale right now, so if you can pray for that. We're selling it to move. So we don't have the regular podcast studio.
Right.
My office is jam-packed because we just hired another person, so there's no space in my office to do it, so we're here in Ryan's office.
Yep. And I did have the realization we could have done my house. We just did an accent wall, like a black accent wall that would have been a really nice backdrop. I'm thinking about it now as I'm sitting here.
Yeah.
But there's always the risk that kids wake up or something because it's in the open area.
Yeah.
So this is the safe bet.
One day we will have Jed and Teddy on the podcast.
That's true. That'd be great.
And who knows what we'll talk about that day.
Yes.
It might be great. I tried to record a podcast with Jed one time, and it did not turn out well. It was a good 5 minutes of him yelling into the microphone. So I didn't figure the listeners wanted to listen to what I listen to every single day.
Right. That's a good call.
Yeah. We are, this would be part trace.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Of, for those who don't know, trace is 3 in Spanish.
Muy
part
inteligente,
part
senor.
3, yeah. Eschatology.
Yep.
We're starting in the Rapture. We're going chronologically through the end times, which if you've been on social media at all recently, I don't know if you have.
No, I haven't.
But it is all over the place. People are talking about the end times, talking about the tribulation. A lot of, I think part of, I always wonder, and I was thinking about this earlier or yesterday, when Jesus comes back and we're all lifted into the sky, we talked about this last time.
Yep.
How do you look at that and not believe in Jesus?
Right.
Like, how do you watch that and think, Jesus is not real, God is not real? Even if I guess you can acknowledge God is real and just refuse to believe, which there will be those people. But the only thing I can think of is AI, that people will say it's AI. That's the only thing I can think of, because I've seen images of there was this cloud in Australia that perfectly had a break in it where the moonlight was coming through and it was like a cross shining in the sky. I wasn't in Australia. Yep. I didn't see it with my eyes. It could be someone just making a drawing.
Yeah.
But there's things like that all over the internet of this cloud is happening. This thing is in the sky. There's this buildup of whatever over here. And I was just thinking to myself, how would you verify any of this if you weren't there? But everybody will know when Jesus comes through the skies. The whole world will know that. Right. But also, if your buddy Phil is gone,
right?
What do you say that? Where do you say that they went?
Yeah, it's no, and it's an interesting question. Even the distinction, I think, between the rapture, and we talked about how it's not a secret rapture, and that we believe that physically people will bodily rise. I don't think that necessarily means that everybody will physically see Jesus.
Okay.
Because we go to meet the Lord in the air in the clouds, right? And we'll always be with the Lord.
Yep.
There is obviously the second coming.
So what country will he come back to?
I think he will be, however that's going to work. And again, it's going to be so obvious to the world that something major has happened.
Okay. So I was under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong. Yep. Obviously you just did, but I thought everybody wouldn't see it happening.
Yes.
Or see, I guess in my mind, I defaulted to see Jesus.
I think you're going to see people going up. And that's what we talked about either the last podcast or the one before that.
Yeah.
That there's not just some sort of magic vanishing act. But scripturally, when you look at places where the tribes of the earth will mourn when they see him, or Zechariah, I'll just read it rather than butcher.
How long does it take Ryan to get to Zechariah?
Yeah, Zechariah is an interesting one. It's towards the end, and it can never quite. Man, I started way too early here. We're an hour in Matthew. There we go. So Zechariah, when the Lord comes back, and
pauses are really good for
a podcast
building up
dramatic
suspension
effect.
and dramatic
Yes,
effect
perfect.
and silence.
Well, there is a great passage in Zechariah.
Start at chapter 1 and go to the end.
Yeah, well, we can just go ahead and read. No, talking about Israel when they see the one, they'll look on him whom they have pierced, right? And they'll wail over him. And this is Zechariah, is it not? Or else it's maybe Isaiah 53, but I'm pretty sure it's not Isaiah 53. Well, you know what? We're just gonna say that somewhere in Scripture.
You can paraphrase it, and I'll find it after.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, yeah. So just basically talking about. Man, this is gonna drive me crazy. The rest of this episode,
it's gonna be just in the back of
my mind. What is going on? Okay, I see it. There we go. Finally, the Lord helped me. Zechariah 12 verse 9. I was even looking at it's either Zechariah 14 or 12, and I couldn't find it. So, it says this: I will pour out on the house of David, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, a spirit of grace that pleads for mercy. So when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly for him as one weeps over a firstborn. So when they look on Jesus, right, there's going to be this wailing as Christ returns, as he comes back. So, I think there's plenty of biblical evidence. Obviously, Acts chapter 1, like we talked about, Jesus going up from the Mount of Olives. Men, while you're looking at the clouds, he's going to come back the exact same way. That he's going to physically, bodily return. People are going to see it. It's going to be obvious. That is a distinction, though, from the rapture, because that's when Jesus physically comes back to earth. Yeah. His feet land at the Mount of Olives. The rapture is, yes, everybody's going to see Christians going up to meet the Lord in the air. I'm not as convinced that biblically you can make the case that everybody's going to see Jesus up in the air when Christians go up. You
said a distinction from the rapture. Did you mean distinction from when he establishes the kingdom? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, no, I'm saying a distinction.
The rapture is separate.
The rapture is separate. Yeah, the distinction from the rapture versus when Jesus comes back and physically lands on earth is two separate events separated by the tribulation, which we'll talk about more in the next episode. So there is the sense that it's going to be everybody see it. AI, absolutely, that could be an explanation for it. But back to your original question, I think it just goes back to the hard-heartedness of mankind. That even though they see this, Jesus, when he was preaching against the Pharisees, he explain to them, you won't believe even if someone comes back from the dead, right? In the story of the rich man and Lazarus, Lazarus saying as he's in the flame, let me go and tell my brothers, let me go and tell my brothers, let me go and tell my brothers so they can avoid this horrible place. He's like, they won't, they're not going to believe you, even if someone came back from the dead. It's signifying you won't believe me, even though you've been around me, and the fact that I'm going to rise from the dead, you still don't believe me. So the hard-heartedness of man cannot be underestimated.
No, I mean, that 100%, I mean, obviously we see it with Pharaoh too, and in Exodus. The other thing too that I was thinking about is, who Forrest Frank is?
I actually don't.
You don't?
No, I know who Forrest Gump is.
Forrest Gump. Wildly different.
Yep.
Forrest Frank is a Christian rapper, or hip hop artist. That is pretty popular with the youth group, and I mean all ages. His music is great. Obviously don't know his theology in depth, but everything that he puts out is pretty good.
Yeah.
He finished tour about 2 weeks ago and went home skateboarding, landed on a rock and broke his back, on his porch. He has video of it. Got a diagnosis, broke his back. 2 weeks later, healed.
Wow.
Doctors are baffled. And he just came out with he on social media just put out a video of I woke up today, just stood up, picked up my son, didn't even think, wasn't thinking, and then realized my back doesn't hurt, and got an emergency x-ray, and he had cracked his vertebrae, and they're completely healed.
Wow.
And he's saying this is he was obviously praying, he was putting out content, making songs still, he loves, you can tell he loves the Lord.
Yeah, sure. Great.
And he was saying this is a miracle, this is a miraculous healing. The Lord obviously still can miraculously heal people. And unfortunately, my first instinct is skepticism. It's my first instinct is to jump to well, maybe it wasn't broken. Maybe they read the thing wrong the first time. I mean, worst case scenario, Forrest is just making the whole thing up for publicity. Right, I don't think that's the case. But then you think back to the Pharisees and when Jesus was there, and if it's so easy for me to say oh, that's not real, that's a miracle. Oh, that's not real. How much easy, or not even how much easier. it's like, it's almost like I can get there
Right.
in my sinful mind.
Yes. Right.
Of like the Pharisees of like, oh, this is somehow a trick. Like that, they lived in a different time, obviously. And there's sorcery and, people that were doing weird stuff all over the place, possession. And like, it could be any of these things and how the healings are happening, but it's over and it's over and it's over. And it's consistent with the scriptures is obviously why Jesus is different, but,
and it's what is the truth, right?
Yeah.
And it's true. And, what did the Pharisees love? They were part of their father, the devil, right? They were part of his system, who was a liar from the beginning. You love him. Jesus basically told the Pharisees, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's an issue of your heart. Whom do you love? And they loved their sin. Though they wouldn't acknowledge it, they loved Satan. They were part of his kingdom, opposed to God. And so they were opposed to the truth. And so that also, I think, helps explain it too. But I know exactly what you mean. Like you can see how we could, in our flesh, just try and discredit things that are true. Yeah. So, although I do think there's wisdom.
There's wisdom in questioning, but obviously I don't know him in person. I wouldn't want to judge the reality until I met him in person. But it is obviously crazy and awesome for him and his family if it was a miracle healing, and the Lord still does heal miracles all the time. And not even just big miracles, the fact that we woke up this morning is a miracle. It's the Lord providing life. It's the sustainer. But anyways, getting back towards the rapture and the eschatology, there's a little brief weave, as we might call it. Yeah. You want to give us a little quick recap of the last two episodes? Yeah,
we were just, talking about in general what the rapture is. We've already kind of recapped some of it here, when the church who is on earth waits to not receive the Lord, but for the Lord to receive the church, for the Lord to come back for his people. We've talked about 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Revelation chapter 3, John 14, other places, these biblical texts that give an indication that the next thing that's going to happen on the eschatological timeline is Jesus coming back for his church. We talked about you don't look for the Antichrist, we look for Christ as Christians. And so the rapture, again, from this Latin word rapio, which is what we get our term being caught up together in the Greek New Testament. It's the translation from the Greek New Testament into the Latin word, which then goes to the English word, like I mentioned a couple episodes ago from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, caught up together. With that, it's our great hope. It's the blessed hope that we have that all believers are going to be raptured. They're going to be resurrected, and they're going to be with the Lord. And so we don't have to look forward to the tribulation, which we'll start talking about in the next episode, because we're not going to be here for that. In that, though, there is, I think we need to acknowledge this in the remaining time we have of this episode wrapping up the rapture, there are competing views. And we've talked about how in eschatology it is an important issue, and that Scripture speaks clearly, I would argue, about eschatology just like it does about any other doctrine of the faith. But that doesn't mean there's not debate. There are Christians who would disagree with the timing of it particularly. And I talked about and explained how I believe the rapture, scripturally speaking, comes before the tribulation. Again, we're not waiting for the tribulation. We're not waiting for the Antichrist. And unfortunately, other Christians are wrong. Unfortunately, other Christians, they just don't see eye to eye on that. And I think there's legitimate reason, right? It's not like they're looking at their Bibles and just saying, well, the passages, Ryan, that you think are pre-trib, before the tribulation, rapture, supporting passages, that's just not actually scriptural. Yeah. They're not inspired. Like, they're not cutting out pieces of the Bible. It's not some
cheeseheads.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Isn't that the name of the people who cut out the parts of the Bible?
Those are Packers fans.
Packers. Yeah. No. Well, yes. But isn't, I remember like way back in my childhood.
Okay. Always dangerous.
Yeah, let's just move on because it's not going to go. Yeah, well. There was some reason why I associate cheeseheads with people who cut stuff out of the Bible, and I think it was because of the Packers. But the denomination that did it was like was something with a P, like packing something or nah. Just maybe. Forget it.
Hey, honestly,
colonial Christian. That's the issue. They taught me that.
Okay, all right, there we go. Let's slam the elementary school. There we go. No, I mean, it would be hilarious. We'll come back to this maybe the next episode or a couple episodes from now. And if we can find something on this would be an interesting study.
There is something in my brain that relates it. It would be interesting.
All I think about is Thomas Jefferson and the Jefferson Bible, him cutting out the miracles because he didn't think they were.
And he was a Packers fan.
Yeah, right. Yeah, pre
Pre-NFL.
Yeah, pre-NFL Packers fan, pre-America, or yeah, I guess he was early in America. Anyways, so these other two views for the rapture that have some traction. I'll start with the least popular and then move to the most popular alternative to what we explained the last couple episodes. The first is a mid-trib rapture view. Now, for $100, what do you think the mid-trib rapture view is? Obviously, it's when the church is raptured in the middle of the tribulation. So the tribulation, we'll talk more about this the next episode, but it's this 7-year period of time where God judges the world, right? People are saved. They come to Christ. They're also a horrific time of judgment, right? On the world, the Antichrist is reigning, kingdoms coalescing against the nation of Israel, getting ready to fight against God, literally, when the Lord comes back. So
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, no kidding. So the theory of the mid-trib rapture view is that halfway through the tribulation, Jesus comes back for his church. The reasons for this, just to highlight a few of them, and then if we can talk further on this before I move to the last one, is they'll make a distinction between the beginning half of the tribulation, the latter half of the tribulation. They'll ask questions like in Daniel chapter 9, where there's the 70 weeks prophecy.
Yeah.
And the 7th week is discussed as the tribulation. Why is there such an emphasis on the midpoint of the tribulation? It seems that there's a marked shift in the midpoint of the tribulation. And so why is there that emphasis? Well, maybe that's because Jesus comes back halfway through. They'll say, hey, the church is not exempt from suffering and persecution. So I made the case that the church is exempt from the tribulation, not because we're exempt from suffering, but because we're exempt from the wrath of God. And they would say, hey, actually, the first half of the tribulation is not really the wrath of God. It's just the wrath of man. It's mankind, and we see the effects of mankind going and wreaking havoc on the earth. And so, in part, they would get to that from Revelation chapter 6 in one place where after the 7 seals, after the beginning part of the tribulation, then you see people saying that the kings, the great ones, the generals, the rich, the powerful, this is Revelation chapter 6, verses 15 and following. They call on the mountains, the rocks, they say, fall on us, hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? And so they would say, hey, that's a marker in the tribulation that now we've moved on from the wrath of man, and we've moved into the wrath of God. So that's an argument. Another place they would go would be 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which we talked about last time. I don't feel a need to necessarily rehash that. But they would have the opinion that that passage is about the appearance of the Antichrist and giving markers for the Antichrist, explaining that the church is going to be there when the Antichrist is there. And I said last time, no, I think it's actually the opposite. That passage is teaching that, or what Paul is teaching is that we're looking for Christ. We'll know we've missed Christ if we see the Antichrist, but we're not going to miss Christ. So it's just, how do you interpret 2 Thessalonians 2? So those are a few places, that's certainly not all of them, where someone who would believe in a mid-trib rapture would go. And they would just, again, position the rapture at some point halfway through the time of the tribulation, saying that there's going to be the rise of the Antichrist, the beginning of the tribulation, not as bad as it's going to be, but the beginning of the tribulation, and then Jesus comes back halfway through. Makes it a little hard, if I could just give one counterpoint in addition to the ones I mentioned, a little hard to really believe that there's not going to be the day or the hour when Jesus returns, no one is going to know. Yeah. Right? Because if the pre-trib rapture is true, literally no one knows the day or the hour. If the mid-trib rapture is true, you're going to have a pretty good idea, because you're going to know when the tribulation starts, because there's a peace treaty that the Antichrist signs with Israel. There's going to be that time clock of 7 years. You're going to be able to do the math and figure out when the halfway point is. So I think
there was a peace treaty that was just signed with Israel.
By who?
Wasn't it America signed one? Or not America. There was a ceasefire, I guess.
Yes,
maybe it wasn't
Iran. Yeah.
Is that technically a peace treaty?
No, that's just a little temporary document that's going to be null and void in 5 years when they decide to start shooting at each other again.
Yeah.
But yeah, this will be incredibly obvious when this peace treaty is signed. World ruler makes a covenant with them, and then he'll turn his back halfway through. So that's the mid-trib. I don't know if you have anything else we want to talk about on the mid-trib, but
no, I don't think I have anything huge to add. What is the how long would it take to read the I guess we're not to tribulation yet. I was thinking about the tribulation, but maybe we can read through the tribulation at one point once we get there.
Yeah, read through what passage? Like
yeah,
all of it?
That's what I'm thinking. Is like, how do we read through it? Because just to give context of, because when you talk about mid trib, it is, if people don't if you haven't read through, well, I guess the whole Bible, but at least Revelation and, what the tribulation entails.
Yeah, no, I think
it's a little difficult to picture.
I think we can read through it. I want to read through Daniel 9 for sure.
Yeah.
The next episode, other places we can look at. But in short, I think for this episode, the tribulation, again, just the 7-year period of time when God is pouring out his judgment on the world.
Yeah.
And Revelation 6 and following, Daniel chapter 9, Matthew 24, a lot of places speak about the tribulation. And I think we can get specific later. But I think for this, just speaking of the rapture, we can put it in the generalities.
Yeah, I would say, to your point, I think mid-trib is probably the stretchiest one.
Mm-hmm.
Pre or post feels more
right,
more attuned to what the populace would believe in.
Right.
Post-trib
is, again, just quickly the other one that's a competing view to what we would believe. And it's a view that is very popular. There's less of a distinction if you hold this view between the church and Israel, right? There's nothing unique about Israel in the tribulation. It's still, most would say it's a 7-year period of time. When you go post-trib, though, you can also just make it more of a general period of time because there's nothing else that's going to happen. Jesus just comes back for his people, and he comes back to earth at the same time. It's one and the same event. And so a lot of the same passages that I referenced earlier, so 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, again, they're going to say, hey, that passage is about us looking for the Antichrist, waiting for the Antichrist. They'll say things like, again, the church is not exempt from suffering, not exempt from persecution. They would also make the argument that the last trumpet spoken of in 1 Corinthians 15 with talking about the resurrection of the body is the same as the last trumpet at the end of Revelation. It's one and the same. There's not two last trumpets, one for the church when the church is raptured and one at the end of the ages when the world falls apart and Christ comes back. They'd say it's one and the same. Other places that they would go to as well, Matthew 24, that would be another passage where they would say, as they look at the biblical argument of what the tribulation is going to be, they would see the church present there, that it's as Jesus is speaking, and I'll even just pull up a verse on this, and we can look at Matthew 24 later in more detail during the tribulation, but when he says, so when you see the abomination of desolation, they would say, well, he's speaking to the church. He's talking to Christians. He's talking to the church that's there. When you see it, then this is what you need to do. My argument would be he's talking to believers who have been saved during the tribulation. He's not necessarily talking to the church because the church, I would argue, is gone. So various passages like that. Again, there's other arguments. We don't need to maybe take the time to ad nauseum go through all of them. But they would just say, even like John 14, when I spoke of that a couple weeks ago and saying, John 14, Jesus is saying, I'm taking you to where I am in heaven. They would emphasize, no, Jesus isn't saying it's about the location of taking you back to heaven in the rapture. It's more just, I'm going to take you to be with me, my presence. And so when Jesus comes back, he's not literally taking the disciples, the church, back to heaven. He's taking them to be with him, which is going to the earth to establish his kingdom. So all of those passages, again, I think it's important to recognize it's not unbiblical arguments. They're not just saying, hey, let's ignore Scripture and let's make Scripture say what we want to say. They do have biblical arguments. I think they fall short for the reasons we had talked about in the last episode, that there's a clear and convincing and a compelling case that Jesus is coming back for his church first before anything else eschatology-wise. But I think as we were thinking through the last couple episodes and tying a bow on the rapture, I do think we need to at least acknowledge there's a couple other positions out there that are popular, particularly the post-tribulation view, that would see no real distinction between Jesus coming back for his church and Jesus coming back to establish his kingdom on the earth.
Yeah, the post-trib part of, rise to meet him in the clouds and then just come right on back down.
Right. It's a little strange.
It's a little disappointing also for me of like, if that's the case, it's like, I just left here.
Right.
Can we go on see something else for a little bit?
Yeah, it doesn't make the most sense. Yeah. If it's what the Bible teaches, it doesn't matter if it makes the most sense to us. But yeah, you get beamed up to beam right back down right away. Like it's a strange thing. Whereas even Revelation 19, man, you see heavens opened, Jesus coming back with those on white robes. Who's that? The church, the victors, the conquerors, the overcomers of the world. And it's not like, wow, do we have enough time to change into our white robes? Like if we're just beamed up, I know that's a silly way of putting it, but it seems like there's a presence there that we're there and we come back down, not that we have just gone up simultaneously to come back down.
Yeah, because you talk about the dead will rise first to meet their
Lord in the air.
The Lord in the air, and then we will rise and follow.
Right.
so if you were to take that away, like say that in Revelation 19, it's a different party of people.
Right.
Who would the party of people be? You know, there's not really
right.
Unless if you say angels, which doesn't really make sense.
No,
you know,
right.
So there has to be a time in which we go.
It has to be the
changed,
church. Yeah, right.
And you know, come back with him. So you know that. Not to say that's beyond the Lord's capability. If that truly is the view, it's not beyond. You know, it's not beyond the stretch of imagination. But
I think it's a stretch to make the scriptural record point to a post-trib.
Yeah.
Rapture.
Yeah. So. Cool. Well, we anything else on the rapture that you wanted to?
No, I think we can now get into some judgment.
Some judgment.
And some severity. Yeah, I say that tongue in cheek, but obviously the tribulation, unlike any time the world has ever seen, it's going to be interesting to talk through that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not it's not rainbows and butterflies.
No, it's not.
It's not. It's quite the opposite.
Yep, so unless the rainbows have, 6-inch, or the butterflies have 6-inch fangs and are, biting people, right? Like that's, then
it's a different type of butterfly.
Yeah, right.
It's a moth. All right. Well, we'll move on to the next episode. We'll cut it off there.
Great.